Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Deon Nicholas, who is the founder of Forethought. And well, actually, Deon has been on the podcast before. He was way back in October 2019, before the world changed, I think. So Deon, welcome back. How are you doing?
Thanks, Adrian. Excited to be here.
So Deon, for people that are not familiar with you and the work that you do and haven't listened to our previous discussion, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch on you, the work you do, and where you're coming from, where you're speaking to us from today?
Yeah, so I'm Deon Nicholas, the CEO and co-founder of Forethought. And at Forethought, we build artificially intelligent agents to help businesses be more productive and more efficient, starting first and foremost with the customer experience. My background, I'm an engineer by training, and prior to that, I was actually in customer service. My first ever job was stocking shelves at Shoppers Drug Mart in kind of the Toronto area, answering lots of customer questions. And as I moved into computer science in college and throughout, I've gotten really fascinated with how AI can help anyone become smarter, help anyone answer customer questions, and eventually founded Forethought to help do this.
Awesome. And you're speaking to us from sunny California today?
Yes, I'm speaking in from California. I live in the Millbrae, so right on the peninsula of San Francisco. So it's pretty nice out today.
Awesome. Welcome. Well, we have been blessed with some sunny weather today, which has been a bit of a change from what it's been in the last kind of month or so. But let's get stuck into this conversation, because today we were talking prior to setting this up about this idea about unbiased AI. And, bias and AI is something that's been lots of people are talking about right now, but I know it's something that you've been kind of working kind of hard on. But first of all, I wanted to start with, to help me understand, how does bias get into AI? And is the bias in the data, in the algorithms, or in the way that we interpret results, just so we can set the record straight, as it were?
There are two parts to bias in AI. The first is how bias happens in kind of human judgment, right? It's actually an everyday part of our lives. When you think about bias, it's really another word for heuristics, for our brains making kind of snap judgments, being able to maybe jump onto patterns that may or may not exist. But that enables us to actually try and make decisions more quickly rather than having to reason through things, which would just make the human brain a little bit more inefficient. And so I think it's really important to think about that. And then in similar ways, artificial intelligence has a similar way of creating kind of bias in AI. So AI learns by reflecting on historical data and learning on data sets that were created by humans. And so what often can happen is that the AI can learn patterns, maybe patterns that are based on the data collection method itself. For example, if you're you're taking a bunch of pictures and the camera had a certain quality, then the AI might actually be picking up on certain pixels that are just a function of the camera, or things like that. And so bias basically happens anytime an artificial intelligence is trying to pick up on patterns that aren't actually what the business problem or the problem calls for, but might be a function of who's creating the data set, a function of the data set itself, or a function of other circumstances.
So that idea about kind of patterns, I mean, because that intrigues me, because it seems to me that, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the models themselves are working with these data sets and they're looking for patterns. And then they're sort of looking for patterns and then jumping to potentially correlations within those patterns. And then are we then jumping from correlation to causation? I mean, is that what's going on here? And is that how, some of the problems that we get into?
Exactly. And that's actually the whole goal of a machine learning algorithm in so many ways. It's to look at these correlations and then try to see which of these correlations are actually inputs that should then cause an output. And so sometimes that can work really well because sometimes there are causations in there, but very often it's actually just a correlation. And even worse is when it's just a correlation because of the way the data was collected.
Right. And is that, because I know you've talked about this idea of like overfitting and things. Is that the same sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So in kind of classical machine learning, one of the biggest problems in kind of machine learning 101 class is the overfitting problem. And it's exactly this, right? So the original use cases, or the very simplest use cases of machine learning models are similar to statistical models. You're trying to draw a line of best fit in a data set, or trying to figure out some correlation or some causation. But what ends up happening is if your models start to train on a specific data set too well, then they start learning some of the patterns in the data set. So for example, if there's an outlier in there that's causing things to shift, then the AI or the machine learning model is going to start to fit that outlier. And so when you start to apply it to new use cases, things start to get wonky. I'll use an example of this that's not necessarily AI related, but a very good example is I'm sure we've all heard of the story of when Google was releasing their kind of mobile video on YouTube. And it turns out all of the programmers who built mobile video for YouTube were right-handed. And so when they finally launched this product, a lot of people were seeing that some of their videos were upside down. And the reason for that was because they were left-handed and holding the camera in a different way. And when uploaded, it was upside down. And so you see stuff like that can happen actually pretty often. In this case, this is just a programming error, but you can get artificial intelligence or machine learning models learning similar patterns.
And I guess I think about it makes me think about it from almost like a gardening and a weed, and gardens always get plagued by weeds. It's almost like you almost have to be continuously weeding sort of out the spurious or erroneous correlations. So we don't use those correlations to jump to, harmful or ineffective decisions. A bit like, so 6'5" men like cheddar cheese, as it were. Which exactly. That might be a correlation in a data set, but doesn't kind of it's a correlation. But it's not doesn't mean to say that all 6'5" men like cheddar cheese, right?
Absolutely, exactly. And so this can be, and I know we're kind of talking about pretty benign examples, but there are also examples where this can be really, really, really dangerous, right? And so there's an example of a man in Michigan who was wrongfully arrested due to a false hit in kind of facial recognition technology. So,
right.
There's a lot of research around facial recognition. And so, for example, if you have data sets where maybe the programmers or the data collectors or even the folks in the data set are all, let's say, a specific skin color, or there are certain correlations based on race or whatever, you can actually see things like facial recognition software that can go awry. And in this case, there was a Michigan man, an African-American man, who was falsely arrested because facial recognition technology actually labeled him incorrectly based on the actual algorithms that they were doing. So there are things like that can actually be really bad, right? So 6'5" man likes cheese is a benign example, and then it could be, hey, man from this particular area or who looks a certain way could be correlated with kind of really bad labels, right? And so
No.
stuff like that can be dangerous over time.
I mean, do you have an example, like say a specific sort of service or experience example of how that might play out in practice or reality? I mean, because that's, I guess, making it real. You're focusing on the service sort of space, and I'm really interested in the service and experience space. So, I mean, can you give me an example to make it real in that domain, as it were?
Within customer service, for example, the diversity of, for example, customer support agents or customer service agents is really wide, right? And so you might get models. So, for example, at Forethought, we build technology to help customers by, responding to simpler questions. We also build technology to support the agents by giving them resources, helping them, teaching them what the more experienced agents are doing and things like that. Now, imagine if you had AI software that was picking up on the wrong things, like, for example, if picking up on the accents of agents or things like that, right? Just from listening in on calls. Well, then it could make the wrong judgments. Hey, person with certain accent happens to have a better CSAT score than other person here, and then actually conclude the wrong things and train the agents in the wrong ways. That could be, potentially dangerous, right? And so I think it's really important not to build models that kind of pick up on the wrong correlations and really focus on the actual factors that matter in customer service, particularly, hey, did you ask these kinds of questions? Did you actually answer the customer's questions? Things like that. Those can actually become more powerful signals that can lead to better agent performance.
So we know that it's like an imperfect system, right? So, but how can we? It's not just a plug, play, and leave system in terms of you get your data, and that's all. It's the data set's always kind of growing, and then you plug in the AI application, and then you kind of expect a kind of magic to happen. I mean, it feels like this is a constant learning process. So what do we need to wrap around these systems to make sure that we're constantly weeding out, if you like, these instances and checking against outcomes to make sure that we're going in the right direction and not producing these ineffective and potentially, but also possibly harmful kind of like results?
The good news about AI systems is that they can be to some degree audited, right? So once you detect that there is a bias or a type of, subclass of data samples for which it's performing incorrectly on, you can actually go and then start adding more to the data set, right? So you can start, for example, in the example of the customer support agents, you can make sure that you have a wide variety, a diverse data set of the ways people speak inside the data set, and then go and test the model on that. And if you see that it's systematically kind of underperforming on that data set, well, now you have like a good audit and a good way to show that regardless of knowing what's going on inside the model, so to speak, you do know that there is some class that's easy to define where the model is showing a system-wide bias. And then you can go do things like retraining. You can do things like actually auditing kind of what's going on, looking at the models, stuff like that. And so it actually takes a lot of work, but it is definitely possible. And so it's kind of like I believe you used the analogy once of weeds, right? In a garden, if you're gardening, you're building the garden, and at any point in time, there's these weeds that crop up. You have to go in, figure out what's going on, and trim the garden, and then kind of replant and keep going from there. And so I do think it is an ongoing process, and that's also one of the things you're going to see with machine learning teams, so to speak, when using artificial intelligence, is these kind of internal audits, the ability to continue to modify the models as you grow in order to make sure that they're again learning the right correlations and then applying those effectively.
If I pick up on the audit comment, because some, as you alluded to, some models are more easily auditable than others. So I guess, and as they get more complicated, they're harder to audit. I mean, so should we, like following the weeding analogy, as it were, is that going to play out? And sort of thinking about how that might play out in reality, is it that we need to almost regularly be testing the models against certain scenarios to make sure that we kind of uncover some of these, call them glitches, if you were, call them biases, suboptimal outcomes, as it were? Is that the sort of thing that we should be doing? Sort of like testing the models as they get more complicated, because otherwise, because we can't easily audit them, but we need still to do implement a way of testing it or a system of testing.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of two things. One, I do think the answer to that is yes, and I actually think there are organizations, nonprofits, and also committees and groups within machine learning and AI companies and customer service groups that do this kind of thing. So, for example, the Algorithmic Justice League by Joy Buolamwini aims to kind of shift the AI ecosystem towards equitable and accountable AI in terms of the computer vision problem. So we've talked a little bit about how facial recognition technology doesn't work well on people with darker skin tones, for example, and can mislabel. And so there are actually groups like that are continuing to kind of do that work. And then at the same time, this kind of reminds me of a very fun problem within machine learning that we call kind of the generative adversarial network. There have been recent models that have cropped up that have been able to produce very human-like text or videos. So if you've ever seen like the AI that can write, a Shakespeare, like a brand new play that or body of text that resembles Shakespeare. The reason I find that interesting, especially in this conversation, is because the way those models are built is exactly what we're talking about. So you get one model to try and produce something that statistically looks like a good human generated data set. And then you build another model that's constantly trying to audit it and trying to pick out what's fake and what's not. And then as both of these models continue to learn on kind of the outputs from one, become the training data for the other, and you repeat, you build two things. You build one model that's really, really capable of generating really good statistical samples. And then you also build another model that's really good at detecting anything with like a fake or a bias or anything that doesn't actually look human or look humanly generated. And so maybe the outputs of those models, using at least one of them, we could actually build systems, and there could probably be entire bodies of work around self-auditing systems or technology like that.
Nice. I love the name of the group that you mentioned as well. The
Algorithmic Justice League. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of a cool name.
I'm like, I want to know that they've got avatars with capes and things and superpowers and stuff. That would be cool. If not, then we should give them superpowers. Anyway, that's really interesting, and it kind of, I guess, lays out a sort of a set of things that many people in service and experience, when they're starting to implement kind of AI and machine learning into the service and support domain, they should be thinking about. But I also can know that you yourselves at Forethought are actually starting to do, or are not starting to do, I've been doing different things and are working differently to try and tackle these issues. And I wanted to sort of like ask you a little bit about that, about what you guys are doing specifically differently, just to get a better understanding of how you're kind of tackling that.
Right. So at Forethought, as mentioned, we build artificially intelligent agents to help improve the customer experience. One of the things that's actually really interesting is you should always start with people, right? So going back to the earlier examples of the YouTube example and facial recognition, one of the biggest things that can lead to sampling bias, so to speak, is a lack of diversity in kind of the data set creators, right?
Right.
And so if you're creating a facial recognition technology and from your vantage point, most of the world looks a certain way, most likely you're going to end up picking images, data sets that kind of resemble that vantage point. So, and no one person can, like I said, right, the bias in your brain is actually the way brains make decisions quickly. And so no one person is going to be able to eliminate that bias from the sample set immediately. But if you actually take teams of people who all come from different backgrounds, from different vantage points, different perspectives, then you're far, far more likely to build more unbiased data sets at the data collection layer. So I think that's actually the first thing is how do you build a diverse team of folks who are actually building the algorithms, the models, the data sets? And that actually ends up being a large part of it. And then secondly, as you're building these models, it's really that idea of auditing, right? And so continuing to kind of think of that adversarial example of something that, hey, here's a type of agent, here's a type of question that we haven't encountered before.
Right.
Let's throw that into the data set in order to kind of counteract that. And then finding more interesting ways to actually collect this kind of varied data becomes an important part of it.
Yeah, no, I love the audit part is something we talked about, but I love the idea about everything's an input, even the team that you hire to help build and test and design and implement these models. So everything's an input. So you almost have to think about everything. And so everything kind of matters. So I think that, it's not something that is on many people. I mean, it's like people talk about diversity and inclusion broadly across organizations, but actually within technology and technological development, there's not a lot of diversity. But it's an ongoing effort to try and improve diversity. But I think by pinpointing that it actually inputs across the piece matter. It's not just about the data and the algorithms, but it's also about the people that build them and kind of build the data sets and also build the models. So it's a really great point. Well made. And so I think it's really kind of really fascinating.
Thank you.
Deon, bring this all to life for us, and kind of tell us a bit about kind of where the rubber hits the road. I mean, I'm sure you've got a couple of fine examples. I know you work with some big brands of, that are leveraging your tech and your approach and what they're doing, and also how it's kind of benefited from them within this sort of like, the service outcomes bias sort of like sphere.
Yeah, so we built technology that helps power some of the largest brands in the world. One of the things I'm super proud of in the past year is that obviously it's been a crazy year with COVID, leading to a lot of kind of hard times, especially for customer service teams. So one of the things that happened was with lockdowns, you see a lot of customer service agents who were, sent home, going to work from home, not having the right equipment and things like that. And Manila, Philippines in particular, last year had one of the, the longest, hardest lockdowns. And that's the customer service center of the world in many places. And so one of the things we were proud of is the ability to use artificial intelligence to, as these agents were shifting to new ways of doing work, giving them the tools to help them get up to speed more quickly, resources and things like that. And then at the same time, as more people were shifting to work from home, this meant more digital interactions, which meant an increase in digital customer service. And so being able to help those customers get their questions resolved over the past year has been something that we've really rallied behind here at Forethought. And so, yeah, we've worked with really large brands, including Instacart, Carta, Pure Storage, Desire to Learn, these large tech companies, many of whom are actually on our customer advisory board now.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it's been definitely a crazy year, but it really does mean something when you can be part of the solution for many businesses around the world.
Yeah, no, it's also important to add that many people, when they talk about the implementation or the application rather of kind of AI when it comes to service and experience, they automatically, many people, automatically kind of jump to, oh, it's a chatbot. It's a AI enabled kind of chatbot. But actually, you didn't start there. I mean, I think you started with, Agatha, which was a bit of a virtual assistant, but actually started inside the walls of the organization to enable agents. And now you've kind of branched out from that as you've kind of almost like proven the technology and then kind of grown it. But then also now you're thinking about rolling it out its power and impact into kind of different applications. So I guess that's just important to kind of ask. So we haven't actually talked about what is it that you actually do.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrian. So really, the way we like to think about it at Forethought is artificial intelligence is more than just a point solution. It's more than just a chat bot and things like that. When we think about artificial intelligence as applied to customer experience, we think about the entire customer experience journey or the journey of a support ticket in many ways, right? And so The start of that, actually it starts way before the customer even goes to your website and hits support. It starts in the product, right? And so we think about how can we use artificial intelligence to discover insights, and give the support team or even product teams information on what they should be doing differently so that they have less support needs in the future. But assuming you can't avoid the ticket altogether, then the customer comes to your website, they're searching for information, they're trying to find things in a self-service fashion. If they can't, then they're talking to potentially a bot, or an AI, and then they're being, for the harder problems, being taken to a human. And so you can kind of see this journey, right? It doesn't just start with, hey, I'm a chatbot, I'm going to be on your website, and I'm going to try to deflect you away from talking to support. There's
Sure.
actually everything from the product experience to the website experience to speaking with a chatbot to speaking with a human, that artificial intelligence can actually play a huge role in. And so as we started our product focusing on the agent experience, as we started to grow Agatha, we realized that it's this entire journey that requires artificial intelligence, and the vision has become really, really large. So with Agatha, we can what we say is solve, triage, assist, and discover. So solving problems for the customer, and that's similar to the kind of chatbot world. Triaging, so routing and making sure the tickets that Agatha can't handle on her own get routed to the right agent in the right channel at the right time. And then we assist those agents with our flagship product, the Agatha Assist product. And then again, going back to discovery of insights so that future tickets don't have to happen at all, right? And so this ecosystem then kind of feeds on itself. Things you learn from discovery help your self-service. With self-service, you can actually figure out what issues are coming in to route them better to agents, and so on and so forth. And so it's become really interesting to see how pervasive artificial intelligence can be in the customer experience space, and it's something that our customers are really excited about.
Thank you for that, Deon. That's great. Useful kind of filling in the background. The one sort of side question, I guess, it made me think, I'm not sure if I ever asked you kind of back in December 19 or not. I can't recall. But I was wondering about where the name Agatha comes from, because I was just wondering, because this would really please my wife as well, if it was from, say, Agatha, if it was inspired by Agatha Christie, given that she was there to sort of solve complex problems. I'm sure that's probably not true, but I just thought I'd ask, where does the name Agatha come from?
So yes and no. It's actually a second order effect. The name Agatha comes from Minority Report. So if you've ever read the book or
Yes,
the movie, there is a precog who can see the future, often gets it right, who's named Agatha. I believe Agatha in Minority Report is named after Agatha Christie.
awesome.
So I do actually think it is there in a second order effect. But yeah, that's kind of where we got the name from.
That's super cool. So, Deon, you're in the heart of all of this sort of stuff, and sort of working with the technology and working with clients and thinking about kind of what's coming next and things. I'd really love to get your view on, where is the future of service and experience? Kind of, what does it look like, and what are some of the big challenges for us ahead that we've got to, I guess, if you like, put on our radar and figure out how do we get around them, or over them, or under them, or through them, or whatever.
I think a couple things are going to be really, really powerful over time. One is just the prevalence of omni-channel support, right? So back in the day, it was only phone. That was the only kind of channel you had to contact support. With the internet effectively taking off, you now started to see digital channels like email being really prevalent. Nowadays, it's starting to be chat. But even if you think about, the Gen Zs of the world, people sometimes just want to text, send an SMS in to support, or tweet, or send a WhatsApp message. And so we're actually starting to see that from the consumer perspective, the ways that they get access to customer service is starting to change and become as ubiquitous as the ways they communicate with their friends and family. So I think that's going to be really important. And obviously, as a vendor, as a customer experience AI company, we actually like to think about that. So how do you become a platform that is channel agnostic and help desk agnostic? Things are starting to become more and more built into the products they're using. And so you're starting to see service come to the consumer rather than forcing the consumer to come to the customer service kind of team. And then secondly, I think it's really important that intelligence is going to play a huge factor, right? So how do we empower humans and our own, teams to be more productive? How do we empower them to do what they do best? Right? People are really great at empathetic questions, questions that require nuance, trust and safety questions, questions that require judgment. And so that mix of the ability to use technology and artificial intelligence for the mundane tasks while being able to empower people, I think is going to be really, really important.
Awesome. I mean, I really like the idea about service being able to go to people and talking about this idea about developing a platform rather than actually forcing people kind of into, if you like, channel spaces, and actually that you end up with technology that gets developed on a channel by channel kind of basis. Because I think you're absolutely right that it has to get unified. It has to become consistent and connected if we're going to achieve some of these experience aspirations that we're, as customers, we're all looking for. But I know that many brands are trying to deliver sort of too.
Exactly.
Deon, I mean, just thinking about wrapping all this up, because we talked about a bunch of different stuff, and I always like to try and boil some of this down. And I know that people get caught up in all of the different things that are going on and the possibilities and stuff, but sometimes it's just about getting started, right? And so if I was to say to you, let me boil it down, and if you were to give somebody a piece of advice, like, one or two bits of advice about what they should do if they wanted to improve the service or experience they deliver to their customers, I mean, what would be your best bits of advice?
The first thing I would say is start with data. Start with looking at where are the biggest problems for your customer experience today. And so thinking again back to the customer journey, is it there are problems that should have been avoided in the first place? Is it that they need better self-service? Is it that you have a very complicated business, you maybe are in fintech or whatever, and so you actually do need people with who are well trained and things like that. So the first thing I would say is really do an analysis on the customer journey and where are the biggest problems, and then second, think about the best ways to apply those. Oftentimes, that's with intelligence, that's with automation, that's with augmenting through intelligence. Oftentimes, it's process changes and or people changes, right? And so, thinking about first, where's the problem, and then two, what's the best solution to apply to that? I think that's the best way to start.
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. I mean, sometimes it's the simplest things can have the biggest impact. I remember hearing about a big mobile telecoms company here in the UK. When they talk about data, they went and asked their customers and their employees to list out all the different things that they thought needed fix or were broken, and they listed them all out, and then they kind of figured out how they were going to fix them, and then systematically went about sort of addressing them. And fascinatingly enough, around about 80% of all the things that were identified weren't technology related problems, but they're all to do with process and procedure and wording and a little bit of design and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, so it's fascinating. Sometimes there's a really simple and very direct approach can be just as effective. And then you can add in the technology to then kind of like to help keep those problems away, as it were, or to kind of enable them or to supercharge them.
Exactly. It's surprising how often that ends up being the case.
It's surprising how often we end up being the problem.
Exactly.
Deon, is there anything else you'd like to kind of add before I ask you my couple of what I'm calling longitudinal social research questions?
Ooh, let's dive in.
Right. So I've asked you these before. This is related to the Punk CX book that I published back in 2019. And the first question I'm asking people is that what one or two words would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience? Now, first of all, like I said to you before, I'm compiling a list. But do you remember what you said last time?
I don't remember what I said last time, but I do know what I'll say this time. But
Okay.
do you remember what I said?
Yeah.
Last time?
Well, you said augment, not automate.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, and that is absolutely true.
Yes.
What I would say that comes to mind today is nimble and intelligent. The nimble goes to the idea that customer experience is going to come to you rather than forcing you as a consumer to come to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll mean, whether it's at the edge in devices or things like that, or literally somebody showing up to your house to go and fix a problem. I think that's how the future is going to play out. And then intelligent, similar to the augment, not automate. But I think thinking about how we can enable genius really both in our people and in our processes. So I think I would go with that.
No, awesome. I like them. I'm not sure. I think both of them might not be on the list, Deon. I think you might have got.
There we go.
You might have got a double hitter. But I will check. But I'm thinking they might not be there. Oh dear, that's brilliant. The list just got longer.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be of service.
And so the second question I've been asking is like, what company or brand do you think epitomizes, I'm more of a punk approach to the experience or the service that they deliver?
I don't think my answer has changed. It is definitely Amazon.
Okay.
And I think I remember.
Yes, you did.
Once, but it's gotten to be a stronger yes on that one. But yeah, anytime I think one of the things is just like anytime you're buying something online, now you associate it with kind of buying at Amazon. But just the way that customer service works, like you can just, if you have any problem at all, the customer is kind of always right. Like it's very, very hard to do that kind of service at scale. And I do think there's probably other companies that are adopting that. I think Amazon kind of learned that from Zappos.
Yes.
They had acquired Zappos, but I do think it's just a really powerful service model.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not just about stuff; it's also about competing and entertainment and all of these different sort of things. It's almost like what I don't know if I told you last time. With my little pop trivia thing around this sort of stuff is, do you remember if you type in relentless.com into your browser, do you know what it heads to?
I'm going to find out. Amazon.com.
There you go. Does that not tell you everything you need to know about Amazon?
That tells you everything you need to know.
And I discovered that and I was a bit like, yeah, that's it. That just says everything about them. They just kind of go at it and just keep going. And I think they're such a juggernaut. And it's a great example in terms of how they apply themselves. Deon, thank you for that. I mean, that's all that I have today. I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your kind of sharing your time and your experience, your insights with you. I'm really excited to see, to hear about your progress and, your route towards world domination, obviously. But I just want to say, thank you for sharing some time with us today. That's been great.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Adrian. It's always a pleasure, and looking forward to doing this again.
There you go. Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.